webinar is Collaborate Securely Using Govern 365 and Microsoft 365 Purview, and safeguarding your most sensitive information in Microsoft 365 with Govern 365 virtual data rooms. So as you probably are aware what a data room is, but I'll still brush up a little bit. So based on Wikipedia, what a virtual data room is, it's an online repository of information that is used for storing and distribution of documents. In many cases, a data room is used to facilitate the due diligence process during an M&A transaction, loan syndication, or private equity and venture capital transactions. So you will see today that how Govern 365 uses data rooms to facilitate the secure collaboration of content within your organization as well as with your external users. So today's agenda, if you can go next. Yeah, so we'll be doing the introductions, then understanding the problem, and then what is Govern 365, we'll cover that. What roles does Microsoft Purview play? So Microsoft Purview is the product that Govern 365 is based on. So it runs on top of Microsoft Purview in a way. And then we'll give a demo of collaborating securely within Govern 365, and then look at some key takeaways and pricing. So to start with introduction, I'm Manish Athavale. I'm the security manager at NetWoven, and with me is Gursimran Singh. He's the product expert who will be talking about Govern 365, and I'll be monitoring any chats and then basically interact with the rest of the people on chat. So welcome, G. Go ahead and get started. And again, thank you everyone for joining.
All right, thank you, Manish. My name is G. I've been with NetWoven for about 8 years, and I've been working with the Government 365 product ever since its inception in small capacities, and then more recently, within the last 2 years, really diving deep into getting this to be a product that's really provides a lot of value. And we'll talk about that value throughout the presentation today, and really how it works to secure sensitive content, and not only secure sensitive content, but makes it super easy to collaborate on it so that we're not locking down things to a degree where it's just hard to work with. So really understanding the problem is that data can be split up into multiple different categories of sensitivity, right? We can't protect all data with the same strategy. So for each different classification of data, we want to protect it with its own relevant and appropriate strategy. So with this split up here, we have the highly sensitive data, internally restricted data, and everything else, just to make it simple, right? There can be multiple different bifurcations within those segments, but as a whole, these segments are the core of what make up our problem statement. So the highly sensitive data is all this information that can lead to significant harm financially and ethically, and it can ruin the reputation of a company if data leaks happen like that. So this is really where Government 365 has its greatest focus, is using Microsoft Purview to protect this data as strictly as it can, while still providing all the collaboration features and still providing all the productivity that we come to expect. The internally restricted data, I mean, this is information, it's pretty self-explanatory, is we want to keep this restricted to within the organization, and we don't want it to get circulated outside. So there's certain strategies to play into this strategy as well. And then everything else is, you can imagine, content can flow within organizations, outside of organizations. This is kind of free flow information, and we want to make sure that this information is appropriately protected, but not to the degree where people are having issues to say, you applied encryption to my files. It's really not that big of a deal. I can share this across with no real harm. And this is the overall statement that we want to make sure that Government 365 can address, and it can solve the problem of protecting your data, the most sensitive and the least sensitive, all in one go. Okay. And the reason why we took this on is because the IBM study about data security really came out with some jarring statistics to say that 82% of organizations struggle to detect data thefts, right? So if the data theft isn't being detected, it can't be prevented either. So we have to be proactive in that measure to make sure that the data, even if it's leaked out, or even if there's an attempt to take it, whether it's uh, on purpose or whether it's accidental, we want to be able to protect that data even if it gets leaked out. And that's really where Purview comes in, is that it's a proactive measure that you can take and you can have a peace of mind with that. Okay, some other statistics: 70% of leaks happen due to human error, right? 79% of organizations lack the right tools. So, we're talking about tools here. We're going to be showing you one tool, actually a couple of tools that can really be a big benefit here. And 72% of departing employees take company data. Now, this is actually a really big one because sometimes you just can't prevent that. If there's a corporate machine that's out there and a user or an employee that's leaving the company somehow is able to take all that data with them, well, if the data is encrypted and protected with the right tools and technology, it doesn't really matter because they're not going to be able to use that data once they're departed. And that's the thing that we're going to be talking about in our demo as well, is how this data is protected from unwanted access, even after it's in the hands of those people that are unwanted for the access. Okay, so where does Govern 365 come into this picture? So the application itself has three modules. There's a self-provisioning application, or the module, which allows us to create these workspaces that we're going to be talking about in a very templatized fashion. It has customizable forms, so everything is super easy to do. Sometimes we've noticed that organizations that do have some sort of protected workspace, creating these workspaces sometimes a pain, right? You have to submit an IT ticket, and can take upwards of 2 to 3 days, sometimes even longer, to create something that works for you. And sometimes when you get the final area, you have to do a lot of work, administrative work, to get it to a place where it's actually functional and usable, and you can use it to share content externally. Okay, so self-provisioning is a super critical portion of this. Our templatized workspaces, we'll call them virtual data rooms. They can be up and running in less than 10 minutes, so that's a huge win. But for the IT organizations that want to have some sort of safeguards in place, those can be security trimmed as well, right? Depending on who we want to allow to create these workspaces, as well as having approval workflows that can step into the middle and say, after a request is submitted, somebody has to go and approve it to make sure that it's a valid request. Okay, the secure collaboration module. Now, this is really where everything kind of comes to a point. We have workspace automatic content protection. So this content protection is the automation of Microsoft Purview sensitivity labels. We'll talk about that in the next slide as well. But the idea here is that whenever a file gets uploaded into this secure workspace, we want it to get protected right away, right? We don't want to have to take in any inputs from external parties or anything that would take time to apply. As soon as a file gets uploaded, depending on who has access to that folder, that location, the appropriate sensitivity label will be applied to the file automatically. It will be embedded within the file. So then we add that extra layer of where if the file gets downloaded and it gets distributed, via email or other channels outside of the company, only those users that have the permissions within that sensitivity label can open it. So if I download a file, I can open it because I've given myself permission. If I send it to Manish, he can probably open it. But if Manish send it to, let's say, Argo or somebody else that maybe does not have access to the file, they can have the file on their PC all day long. But when they click on it, it'll ask them for their username and password, and they'll get an access denied because they haven't been given permission. So that's really the shining point. And this kind of comes back to the point of, if an employee takes files with them, right? If they're encrypted well enough using Microsoft Purview and with the right sensitivity label, you can have those files on any PC, but they won't be able to be consumed by anyone that doesn't have access to them, right? Or that hasn't been granted access to them via the label. Okay, and the compliance piece, we're not going to talk about today in today's context, but it's essentially a enterprise level compliance module where organizations that have hundreds and thousands of workspaces, we want to be able to automate their management. So workspace recertification, disposing of them in an intelligent way, in an automatic way, as well as tenant-wide content inventory reporting that can really shine a light on where the data is, what type of data exists within your tenant. Is it protected, to what degree, what gaps there are? All that can be really, really insightful. Okay, and then we will also talk about the user activity that we're going to be displaying in the data room itself. So you can see exactly who's accessing which files and at what time. And that's a really intelligent way to kind of get an overview of what's happening in your workspace without having to go out and ask the actual individuals of like, which files are you working on and things like that. Okay. So Purview obviously has multiple different portions. So what we focus on is the information protection side of it. So obviously there's, data loss prevention, e-discovery, governance, information barriers, insider risk management. All those are components of a Purview installation or a Purview deployment if you have it at your organization. And NetWoven works with organizations to actually do these deployments. And we have a very good track record of getting Purview deployed. And actually, as a fun fact, Government 365 is a result of a very large enterprise level Purview deployment where this was a tool that was being used internally, and we were able to commercialize it and present it in a form because we thought it provided a lot of value at that organization. We thought, everybody else should have the ability to have the same level of functionality and same level of security as well. Okay, and on the left side, you see, this is just an example of sensitivity labels that you may have if you have Purview at your organization. Um, and this is the manual way to apply labels. If you're working in a Word file, PowerPoint, or an Excel, you can just select a label based on your own judgment and have it be protected. But Government 365 takes that out of the equation of manually selecting, and it does that automatically for you without you having to think about, what's the right label, what's the wrong label. We make that determination for you based on whoever you've given access into the repository. Some common use cases we have, we work on research projects, product development, lots of supplier and customer collaboration, excuse me. M&A is a huge one. Obviously, there's going to be lots of companies that are looking for a way to share their financial data, their company information very securely to outside firms, to investing firms, or to potential buyers. So this is one of the biggest things that virtual data rooms are, used for in general. But we've gone beyond that use case and, allowed a lot of other different use cases to take advantage of the technology here. Board meetings, audits, legal proceedings, joint deal management, financial planning and analysis is another big one. Because this data is like we mentioned, right? It's in the highly sensitive category, so we want to be able to protect that with the utmost level of security. Okay, and Manish highlighted a little bit in his intro about what is a virtual data room. So in essence, it's a secure online repository for document storage and distribution, right? We want to be able to present data there, have external parties come in, consume that data in whatever way that they need to, and then be able to take some action on it, right? Mostly historically it's been used for mergers and acquisitions for due diligence purposes, and they have varying levels of security, right? Typically we want to have the ability to block any copying and printing or any sort of redistribution beyond what's already been provided. We don't want anybody to be able to go in, take pieces out, and then send them across to other people that may not have the authority to look at this content. So those are the kind of restrictions that are typically placed on virtual data rooms. And sometimes through legal regulations, these files are to be hosted by third parties, but that's not the requirement. But typically that's how virtual data rooms have worked in the past, right? It's all third party hosted because they kind of act as a middleman to both parties, the internal sharing organization as well as any external partners coming in. So quick poll, Argo, if you want to launch the poll really quickly, we want to learn about our audience today is, where they are in their journey in their virtual data room research. So if you can please go ahead.
Sure.
All right. I think we have majority of the folks have answered. I'm gonna move on. And thank you to everybody that provided their answers. It's really helpful to know exactly where you are in your journey, so we can kind of tailor that conversation, depending on where you are and what you already know. So we talked about what a virtual data room is, but with technology, there's challenges to everything. So the typical challenges that we've come across from working with customers that, migrate from one virtual data room to another is their existing virtual data rooms have, lack of data sovereignty. So obviously that whole third party concept, you're uploading your data and giving it to a third party, how much you trust them, that's up to you, right? But the fact that your data is leaving your organization and going into another organization's database, that's a risk, right? The use of several encryption technologies or none at all. So sometimes the ubiquitousness of DRM technologies is not as prolific as we expect. So if there's a technology that's being used by one virtual data room provider, there's no guarantee that that's going to be accessible to everyone out there, right? So there's challenges in making sure that people that should be able to access the data can smoothly do it. If there's hiccups, if they have to, do a lot of workarounds in order to get to the data, that's also an issue. Majority of virtual data rooms that we've come across do not have any sort of linkage between Microsoft 365 and the virtual data room itself. So there's a lack of productivity. M365, is a giant for collaboration, and that's pretty much what, they're designed to do from the modern standpoint, and being able to take advantage of that while being in a virtual data room and having that level of security, that's going to be a huge plus point, and that's a challenge in existing virtual data rooms that we don't have that. And then sometimes users that are used to one area or one type of room, and if they go into a different technology for their partner, they have to learn a new UI, and that's not the easiest thing sometimes. Especially considering how different some of them look and how different some of them behave. But having something that's more or less widely accepted in the industry, that's super helpful in leading to adoption. Okay. And lastly, the operating costs are not cheap. They provide a service that is very sought after, and the cost of running a virtual data room is not going to be low by any means, because they're also hosting your data, right? There's a data hosting, there's the actual service of protecting the content. There's the entire enablement of this service can be very, very high in operating cost. And how we alleviate those challenges and how we solve those problems is the lack of data sovereignty issue is a moot point, because we're hosting content in your own tenant. We deployed Govern 365 in your organization, and it sits on top of your Azure tenant. It harnesses SharePoint Online as a database, and you actually are in control of all your content. It never leaves. It comes into the Govern 365 database under any circumstances. So huge win there already right off the bat is that there's no upcharge for data storage. You're not limited to say, your plan only allows you to have 1 GB or 5 or whatever that number might be. That's completely up to you. How much ever data you need to store, you can, because the SharePoint Online environment is in your tenant. You can make a request to IT to bump it up to a terabyte, and go even higher if you want to. And yeah, you have that capability. It's in your hands. The lack of the use of several encryption technologies or none at all. So we talked about Microsoft Purview. The encryption is built into Microsoft Office, and natively it's built into Govern 365 as well. So the use of something that's already native, if you're going to share a Word file, it's going to be open in Microsoft Word. And if Microsoft Word can natively support the encryption technology of that file, there's really no issues there. And that leads to a lot of reduced pain in thinking about, will this file work for me? It will work. It's a guaranteed thing that Microsoft has, is that their tools worked well together, and they'll continue to. Okay. The productivity, so having full Microsoft 365 integration is going to be a huge, huge plus point. Like we mentioned, SharePoint Online is the database of choice. So your internal users and your external users both log into the same tenant. The external users can log in using their corporate credentials, and the internal users already have their corporate credentials, from the internal side, and they'll be going into the same exact workspaces. They'll be opening the files. They can collaborate on the file if they so choose to. Search is fully enabled, e-discovery, all of the features that you are used to using within SharePoint Online are fully supported despite the files being encrypted. So that's the big bonus of having um, a very interconnected ecosystem like we do have here. So the UI argument, right? It's every different virtual data room technology has a different UI. Some of them are closer together, some of them are very different depending on the use case. But SharePoint being SharePoint, Teams, they're all ubiquitous, right? They're the same for mostly every single company that's been using it, and the users have already come to know how to use it. So logging in doesn't seem like a foreign experience. It's something that you're used to probably, and you can continue to just work that same way without having to learn anything new. And the operating costs are significantly reduced with Government 365 compared to other solutions, simply because we do have flexibility in our plans, right? We bill by, and we'll talk about it in the pricing slide as well, but our plans are based on the number of data rooms and not necessarily the number of users. So if you need more data rooms at a given time because there's more activity, you can have more. If you want to reduce your monthly bill and have less data rooms open, that's your choice as well. And the fact that you can maximize your existing Microsoft 365 licensing is also a huge cost saver, right? So you already have a database that you have paid for in SharePoint Online, and using that entire Microsoft 365 license, why not use it to its full extent, right? Host it as a virtual data room, and all you really need to pay for is the automation of that security, as well as the reporting, as well as the creation of those workspaces that comes with the Government 365 license. Right. And like we talked about, I think this slide we can skip over. We're using Advanced Information Protection Engine that weaves Microsoft Purview's native security features into a cloud-based SharePoint Online workspace. Okay, so we have the demo here. We're going to be talking through the Unified Directory workspace and the self-provisioning, the virtual data room walkthrough, in using secure collaboration, secure sharing, and permissions management. And then lastly, we'll end off with the workspace analytics. Okay, so this is just going to be a pre-recorded video that I made earlier just to save some time, and we're going to start it off. All right, so that was a quick demo into the secure collaboration and some of the features that Microsoft Purview injects into um, that entire experience. You notice that um, as I was doing the screen recording of this, the file that was open, even the screen recording itself had the blacked out window. So um, that's basically Purview doing its job, right? It's preventing me from being able to somehow capture the contents of that file and exfiltrate it. So you can imagine if somebody really, really wanted to get, the content of that file, um, out, and they wanted to share it digitally. Obviously screenshots are prevented like we saw, but even screen recordings using, Camtasia or other software, that's blocked. So it goes really deep. And that's kind of the whole purpose, is that how we got to that stage was very simple. All I did was upload a file. The rest of that entire mechanism was completely automated, right? And that's one of the key takeaways that I want to have along with one of these, or along with these other four, which is that you get to use a software that you already own and love, which is SharePoint and Teams, and you have, seamless collaboration because of it. Your data sovereignty is ensured because your information stays within your tenant, and it does not have to go out to a third party's database or anything that would potentially be a source of leakage. Automatic content protection, right, with world-class encryption. So the only thing that probably could break the encryption is maybe some sort of high cipher FBI supercomputer that no one really has access to in the real world. And then the analytics provide intelligent insights so that you can be in control, and you can have a pulse on all of your data and where and how it's being accessed. Okay. And it looks like there's some questions in the chat, maybe. We'll cover
Yeah,
we'll cover the
we'll
QA.
cover the question. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll
That's
cover the
fine.
QAs in the slide, in the next couple of slides. Okay. All right. So I briefly brought up pricing a little bit earlier, but wanted to give you a full breakdown of what that looks like. So we have 5 different editions depending on what the need of the hour is. And you can always go from one edition to the other at pretty much any given time, and we just prorate the numbers, for based on usage. So our light edition is 1 virtual data room, and it's $149 per month. The data room edition comes with 5 VDRs, and then 15, and then the standard and enterprise come with unlimited VDRs. The only major difference between the standard and the enterprise is that the enterprise contains all of the major compliance features that we talked about, whether it comes to workspace recertification and automatic content lifecycle and things like that. Okay. And we can always have the discussion with you to do a quick workshop, do a personalized demo to see what it is that you really need. Sometimes you can do more with less. So if you only have 1 virtual data room, you can still get by and get your work done, get your job done. But if you have a need for do more because your use case is more specialized, then we can pursue other different licensing and tiers as well. Okay. Next steps, like I mentioned, you can get a personalized demo. Please go to govern365.com. There should be a link right at the top there to request a demo, or you can contact Abe Ortiz. He's my counterpart at Govern365. He handled all of the sales portion of things, so you can reach out to him and get his attention. All right. Questions, Manish? I think we have a couple of questions.
There are 3 questions so far. So first of all, thank you, G, for giving a wonderful overview of Govern 365 and how our users can securely share content with internal and external users. So a few questions that have come up. First question is, do I need to have Purview rolled out to use Govern 365 data rooms? Can you provide some details?
Yeah, very good question, actually. So the short answer is no, you don't need it. And the longer answer is that Purview has multiple different components. And when we deploy Govern 365, we basically just enable that one part of Purview that we need from the Govern 365 app side in order to work. So what that looks like is we basically create a pool of sensitivity labels, which can be associated with virtual data rooms when they get created, and roll those out to service accounts that are going to be doing the actual backend operations. So if you don't have Purview rolled out currently, that is not an issue, but it does lead to you potentially rolling it out, right? So once you have sensitivity labels introduced to your organizations by the virtue of the virtual data room here, you may be enticed to say, hey, maybe we want to roll these out to the rest of the organization manually as well, so you can select and protect content as you're creating it, not just when you're sharing it.
Great. So the next question is, do I need a separate Power BI license for the reports to work? Because you're showing some analytics and reporting features. So
Yeah, the reports are Power BI, but the license that you would be purchasing for Government 365 includes that embedded Power BI license, so you don't need a separate license. So yeah, you're going to be fine just with the embedded license that comes with the app itself.
And the last question was, how does an external user get authenticated? Do you issue a new identity for each external user?
Good question. Very good question. So there's multiple ways, right? So the basic happy path to getting access involves creating a guest account for your external user, which happens automatically when you add them to the data room. So when we go into the group, remember I was showing the group membership. So when you click add user and you add in the email address of the external party, if they're not already a guest user in your tenant, then they'll get an invite through Azure to become a guest user. They click the accept invitation button and they go through a couple of checks, and permissions. And once that's done, they are ready to be able to be granted access. So then you adding them to the group automatically initiates that. And within about 10 to 15 minutes, they'll get another email to say, hey, you've been added to so-and-so virtual data room. Please click here to access all the files. So that's the easy way, right? If they're already an Azure B2B customer, or they're from an Azure organization and they can just use B2B to do that connection. The other way is if you're using a different identity provider, then you can simply sign up with your Microsoft account that might be associated with your corporate credentials, or as a last resort, do a one-time password. A one-time password will basically every time you log in, you'll be sent something through your authenticator app or through SMS, and you can log in through that.
Great answers. Thank you, G.
All right. Thank you all for coming to the webinar today. Hopefully you found it enlightening. We do look forward to hearing from you. So, please reach out to our team. We can set up a personalized demo. Obviously, the demo I did with today was 6 or 7 minutes long. If you sign up for a demo with us, we can have the entire hour to ourselves and discuss different use cases and how to see how these problems have been solved with our other customers, and how you can take advantage of the technology here. So looking forward to hearing from all of you. Thank you so much.